Lamar Jackson, who just finished his second year in the NFL, won the MVP trophy and led his team to a top seed in the NFL playoffs. Jackson's road to get here was not an easy one. But who is Lamar Jackson? In the Who Is series, I go through the backstories of collegiate and professional athletes. Like this video and consider subscribing to the channel. We release football related content every Monday and Friday along with baseball content on Wednesday. Lamar Jackson was born on January 7th, 1997 and grew up in Pompano Beach, Florida. He originally attended Santa Lucies High School before he transferred to Boynton Beach High School during the spring of his sophomore year. Boynton's head coach, Rick Swain, knew Lamar Jackson was something special after his first play in practice. Originally, Swain ran a wing tee offense that had one option play. During practice, he called that play and watched Jackson go 60 yards untouched. Right then, Swain knew he needed to change the offense to fit Jackson better. Swain decided to switch the offense to a Muskegon pistol offense. Opposing coaches knew Jackson was the best player on the field, but always failed to stop him. One coach tried to shut Jackson down completely. The coach had the defense double cover their top wide receiver and told his players to stay in their rush lanes rather than rushing the quarterback. Jackson still dominated in the game and his team went on to win 64-29. There's one play that turned Jackson into a household name in high school, and if you are a football fan, you've probably seen it. On this play, Jackson was in a shotgun formation inside the red zone. He took the snap, stepped forward to avoid an edge rusher, and then rolled to the right, pump faked at the line of scrimmage, pointed to and beat one defender to then stop on a dime to avoid another defender, and walked into the end zone. This one play went viral and can still be found on social media today. In 2 years as a starter, Jackson led Boynton Beach to a 21-4 record while outscoring opponents by 536 points. Jackson threw for 2,263 passing yards, rushed for 1,624 rushing yards, and had 53 total touchdowns. Lamar Jackson was in the same recruiting class as both Jarrett Stidham, link to that video below if you have not seen it, and Kyler Murray. Jackson was a 3-star recruit who was the 12th ranked dual threat quarterback in the nation, 60th best player in Florida, and 409th best player nationally. Some schools were concerned about Jackson's arm strength and wanted him to switch positions. Florida State was recruiting him as a defensive back rather than a quarterback. It also didn't help that Jackson started his recruitment late. A key part of the recruiting process is going to different camps to get yourself in front of different coaches, but Jackson never went to these camps. Jackson had 19 different offers and narrowed it down to Louisville, Florida, and Nebraska. Louisville won the Jackson sweepstakes when he decided to commit to them on August 30th, 2014. Jackson enrolled at Louisville on June 14th, 2015. Going into his freshman year, he was not expected to get much playing time. Many viewed him as a third, even fourth string quarterback on the roster. In the first game against number 6 Auburn, Reggie Bonifant started the game, as well as Jackson, which is 24-0. Jackson finally was able to get into a groove and led a major comeback that just fell short, with number 6 Auburn winning 31-24. Jackson finished the game throwing for 100 yards and an interception, while also rushing for 106 yards and a touchdown. Jackson's performance against Auburn was good enough for him to be named the starting quarterback against Houston. Jackson struggled throwing for 168 yards, 1 touchdown, and 2 interceptions, while also rushing for a touchdown, before being replaced by Kyle Bolin. Bolin took most of the snaps in a 20-17 loss to Clemson. Jackson was named the starter once again against Samford. Jackson threw for 212 passing yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception, while also rushing for a school record by a quarterback with 184 rushing yards and 2 more touchdowns. Louisville went on to win that game 45-3. Jackson threw for 103 yards and a touchdown, while also rushing for 121 yards and another touchdown against NC State. In a loss to Florida State, Jackson threw for 307 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 1 interception. In the Music City Bowl, Jackson threw for 227 passing yards and 2 touchdowns, while also rushing for 226 yards and 2 more touchdowns. After that performance, he was named the MVP of the game and seemed to lock up the starting quarterback position going into his sophomore year. Jackson finished throwing for 1,840 passing yards, 12 touchdowns, and 8 interceptions. He also rushed for 960 yards and 11 touchdowns. Jackson finished second in the voting for ACC Offensive Rookie of the Year, and Louisville finished 8-5. Going into his sophomore season, Jackson was named the full-time starter and went on to light up the stat sheet. He started off the season with a bang, throwing for 286 yards and 6 touchdowns, while also rushing for 119 yards and another 2 touchdowns in a 70-14 win over Charlotte. In a 62-28 win over Syracuse, Jackson threw for 411 yards, 1 touchdown and 1 interception, while also rushing for 199 yards and 4 touchdowns. In a 63-20 win over Florida State, who was ranked second in the nation at the time, Jackson threw for 216 passing yards, 1 touchdown and 1 interception, while also rushing for 146 yards and 4 touchdowns. After his performance against Florida State, Jackson was in the driver's seat for the Heisman and never looked back. Against Marshall, he threw for 417 yards, 5 touchdowns, and an interception, while also rushing for 62 yards and 2 more touchdowns. In a major matchup against the Deshaun Watson-led Clemson, Lamar Jackson threw for 295 yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception, while also rushing for 162 yards and 2 touchdowns. But Louisville fell short. Lamar Jackson put up an insane statistical season, throwing for 3,532 yards, 30 touchdowns, and 9 interceptions, while also rushing for 1,571 yards and 21 touchdowns, which were both ACC records for a quarterback. Jackson won the ACC Player of the Year, ACC Offensive Player of the Year, Davey O'Brien Award, and Maxwell Award. Lamar Jackson also won the 2016 Heisman Trophy over Deshaun Watson and Baker Mayfield, becoming the youngest Heisman winner ever. Unfortunately, Louisville as a whole did not have the same success as Jackson, losing their final 3 games of the season and finishing 9-4. Going into Jackson's junior season, expectations were high for both him and Louisville. Louisville beat Purdue in the opening game of the season, where Jackson threw for 378 yards and 2 touchdowns, while also rushing for 107 yards. Against North Carolina, he threw for 393 yards and 3 touchdowns, while also rushing for 132 yards and 3 more touchdowns. Jackson threw for 3 touchdowns and an interception against Clemson, but once again fell short to the Tigers. In a loss to Boston College, he threw for 332 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception, while also rushing for 180 yards. Jackson threw for 330 passing yards, 1 touchdown and 1 interception, along with 161 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns in a loss to Wake Forest. In a win over Syracuse, Jackson threw for 270 passing yards and 2 touchdowns, while also rushing for 111 yards and 2 more touchdowns. Although Lamar Jackson threw for 3,660 passing yards, 27 touchdowns, and 10 interceptions, along with 1,601 rushing yards and 18 touchdowns, Louisville only finished 8-5 and lost the Tax Slayer Bowl to Mississippi State. Jackson won the ACC Athlete of the Year award and finished 3rd in the Heisman voting behind Baker Mayfield and Bryce Love. Lamar Jackson decided to forego his senior year at Louisville and entered his name in the 2018 NFL Draft. In his career at Louisville, he threw for 9,043 passing yards, 69 touchdowns, and 27 interceptions. He also finished his career with 4,132 rushing yards and another 50 touchdowns. During the draft process, Bill Polian stirred up controversy when he said that Lamar Jackson was too short to play quarterback and should switch to wide receiver. Jackson, according to Bleacher Report, is 6'3", taller than 5'11" Baker Mayfield, who had no such comments made about him. Polian also said that Lamar Jackson was too inaccurate to play quarterback. Jackson had a 59.1 positions. Jackson wanted coaches and GMs to see him as a quarterback, not a wide receiver, so he decided not to run the 40-yard dash at the Combine and his pro day. Jackson's strategy worked when the Baltimore Ravens made him the 5th quarterback taken off the board behind Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold, Josh Allen, and Josh Rosen. He was taken as the 32nd overall pick in the 2018 NFL Draft. Jackson was viewed by many as a developmental quarterback and was expected to sit for most of the 2018 NFL season behind Joe Flacco. That was until Joe Flacco suffered an injury and Lamar Jackson was thrown into the starting role. In his first career start against the Cincinnati Bengals, Jackson led the Ravens to a win and throwing for 150 passing yards, 1 interception, and 119 rushing yards. Jackson led the Ravens to a 6-1 record as a starter and a spot in the playoffs, finishing 10-6. Jackson threw for 1,201 yards, 6 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions, while also rushing for 695 rushing yards and 5 touchdowns during the regular season of his rookie year. The Ravens would lose in the wildcard round to the Chargers 23-17. Jackson became the youngest quarterback ever to start a playoff game at 21 years and 364 days old. Jackson struggled in the game, completing 14 of his 29 passes for 194 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. He also rushed for 54 yards, but had 3 costly fumbles. Lamar Jackson seemed like the future of the Baltimore Ravens, and Baltimore proved that when they traded away Joe Flacco to the Broncos during the offseason. Expectations were high for Lamar Jackson going into his sophomore campaign. During the regular season, Jackson did not disappoint, throwing for 3,127 yards, 36 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions, while also rushing for 1,206 yards and 7 touchdowns. Jackson played in 15 games, going 13-2 as a starter, leading the Ravens to the number 1 seed in the playoffs. Unfortunately, the Ravens came out extremely flat and were upset by the Tennessee Titans in the divisional round of the playoffs. Jackson threw for 365 yards, 1 touchdown, and 2 interceptions on 59 pass attempts. Jackson was named to the Pro Bowl as well as the first-team All-Pro team. Jackson led the NFL in passing touchdowns and was named the MVP of the 2019 season. Expectations for the Baltimore Ravens will once again be very high, and it will be interesting to see what Jackson will do this coming season. But might I add, Jackson will only be 23 years old at the start of the season. If you like this video, check out my other videos in the Who Is series. Leave a like and subscribe to the channel, and remember to embrace the grind.